Good evening and welcome to the Audit and Standards Committee meeting of Burnley Borough Council on the 13th of January 2021. Committee members present are Chair of Audit and Standards Paul Campbell, Vice Chair Shah Hussain. Other members present are Sue Graham, Bill Brindle, Tom Commis, Lorraine Mahana and Anu Tatchell. Co-opted members Louise Gaskell and Stuart Arfield are also present, as is the Council's external auditor Barry Morris. All council officers required at the meeting are also present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone. If we can start with the housekeeping then on the agenda. We've got apologies, please, Imelda.
Apologies from Parish Councillor Catherine Howard.
Thank you. And minutes of the last meeting. Any questions? Observations? No, we're all good. We accept those as a correct record? Yeah, lots of nodding. Thank you. Additional items?
Chair.
No, thank you. Declarations of interest. Any member? No. Good on that, thank you. Exclusion for the public, as per. Do we have any public questions, Imelda?
There are none, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to tonight's business, the external audit report. That's going to be a verbal report. I'll pass over to Barry for that. Thank you very much, Barry.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just a very brief report from me this evening. We can confirm that we have received the financial statements and the audit is well progressed. Our audit testing is underway and officers are responding to our queries appropriately. There are no matters that we wish to bring to members' attention at this time. I would just emphasise that obviously the audit is slightly later than we would expect it to be. However, you're not out of line with many others in the country. I think as at the end of November, the actual completion rate of audits nationally was about 50%. So whilst as a firm we are working to make sure that all audits are completed in a timely way, we will be reporting our audit findings at the next committee meeting in March, at which point the audit should be completed. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Barry. Any member? Any officers want to add any follow-up? No? Okay, thank you for that. We will move on to item 8, the annual governance statement. I think this is Salma that's leading on this.
Thank you, Chair. The annual governance statement is published alongside the statement of accounts. The review process has now started. Assurance questionnaires and certificates have been sent to all heads of service and to executive members. Various documents and publications will be used for evidence gathering for the review. The main document for the review is SIPFA's delivering good governance in local government, and other documents such as SIPFA's role of Chief Finance Officer, role of Head of Internal Audit will also be used as part of the review. Once completed, the annual governance statement will be signed by the Chief Executive Officer and the Leader of the Council, and the statement will then be reported alongside the statement of accounts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Salma. So on that point, if I can just bring in some members first. Maggie, can you speak?
Thanks, Paul. It's a question really. I've been coming to this committee for quite some time, so obviously I may have seen these papers before. My first question, is this paper that's in front of us any different from that which we've seen in previous years? Is the process any different? And also, if you're getting the executive to agree the governance statement, there's been a change of administration partway through the year, and is that accommodated in the process?
Thank you. Yes, but we have, there has been a slight, in the assurance statement, there has been a slight change to include issues and concerns about the pandemic. So that has been included in there. We are also aware that we have requested for the existing executive members, and we are aware that there was a change. We have sent it to the existing executive members, the assurance certificates. So there is some changes in regards to the review, but some of the paperwork and the documentation will be same. SIPFA, we are looking to see if SIPFA have released anything new for this for this financial year as well. So if there are any more new publications, that will also be included as part of the review.
Okay, thank you so much. Does that answer your question, Maggie?
The current administration have taken over fairly recently, and if you're going to have a governance statement that gives assurance, I would have expected there to have been some dialogue with the previous administration in order to assure that process, whether it be informal or not. Is that a reasonable comment to make?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Maggie. Let me just bring in Ian and see if he can expand on the previous answer. Ian, have you got something to add?
Yes, we do have a precedent here. Generally, we don't go back previous administrations because obviously we do change administrations split years before, and we have done this in previous things. If we experience any problems with any executive member or officer asking that they don't feel able to provide assurance, then we will start to expand that particular thing to include previous administration officers. But any member who feels that there is a problem with any aspect of the council's governance at any time can express that to the council's monitoring officer or to myself or to any of the sort of heads of service, that they will then be in effect have to report that through into their governance assurance statement. So they should be covered, any queries that they brought up during the year or otherwise. So it should be covered within the existing system. But if there is anybody who feels that they're unable to provide that assurance because they've been in too short a period, then by all means we can expand that to include the previous administration if that is suitable.
Thanks for that, Ian. Thanks, Paul. Just a final comment. I think it's just important, if there has been a change, that we demonstrate to our residents that that's been looked at. I understand the process, and I have been here long enough to know what would be done. The reason I'm asking the question is to make sure that anybody that's watching us on YouTube is absolutely clear that we do have a agreed process of how we do it and how we manage it, particularly when there has been a change of the administration during the process. And I am also well aware that if there are any concerns, those can be brought up at any time. But thank you, Ian, for reminding us.
No, it was a fair question. Thank you for that, Maggie. Can I bring Sue in?
Thank you, Paul. When I got the agenda for tonight's meeting, my first thought was, when I saw that we were about to do the assurance statements, my first thought was, well, will we be doing it together with previous incumbents of the executive roles? So I'm pleased that Maggie brought that subject up, and I'm quite happy to have a discussion with her about it. But can I ask when these pieces of paper have been sent out, because I haven't received mine yet?
Yes, thank you. It's just been recent that they've been sent. They should be sent this week, so they should hopefully get to you if by the end of the week or the following week, depending on when the post is sent to yourselves.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I look forward to that. Maggie, I'll contact you when I get them.
Okay, thank you both. Any other member?
Chair, I think Luckman has requested to speak to this item.
Go ahead, Lachlan.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry,
No, I think we're good.
Paul?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, can I just make a quick comment? In relation to the annual government, Ian's answered most of the question. Ian and I will take it offline on how to include the preceding executive members if the committee are minded for us to relook at that position raised by Councillor Lishman.
I mean, speaking personally, I don't think there's anything that needs to change right now. And it sounds like the current members are happy to look at that jointly outside of the meeting. But if it comes up after the meeting, then by all means we can put it on the agenda or have a look at it outside of the meeting. Is everyone happy? Yeah. Okay, so if we move on to point 9, this is the internal audit update, and this is Ian that's taking that. Can I just ask whoever, I think someone, I can't see them, has got their mic on and it's a bit squeaky. Can just sort that. Thank you.
Chair, everyone is muted, Chair. Perhaps we just proceed and see if that problem comes back. Is everyone else picking up a squeak in the audio?
Yeah, I think it might be a WebEx issue because everybody is muted.
Okay, Ian, if you want to take us on point 9, please. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, yes. I'm very pleased to report that we have managed to complete some of the audit plan in Q2. And we have still been supporting the Council's COVID response in several different areas. So we have been progressing, and as you can see there, we've managed to deliver 12 reports, which is a substantial element of our sort of target. I don't think we will achieve the target this year, but I'm pleased to sort of say that we are on target at the moment. We do have a vacant auditor's position. We have tried to recruit to that once, and unfortunately, although we received candidates and we interviewed, we were unable to appoint. So we're going to re-advertise that position and try again before we start to sort of pull my hair out a bit more. But both these, the COVID response and the lack of the auditor, will have an impact on the plan delivery. And that may mean that we need to provide some limits to the scope of our internal audit assurance that we provide as part of the annual audit opinion. But I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Any member?
No requests received at this point, Chair.
Can I bring Maggie in? She wants to jump in.
Thank you. I hadn't got around to RTSing. I'm assuming that the audits that have been managed to have been done are basically paper exercises that have been carried out, because I can't see how you're going to manage them otherwise. But my main question was really, and I understand, prioritise any audits that you do carry out to make sure that those audits are targeted appropriately when you've got limited resources.
Yes, Chair. We obviously do have a risk rating for each audit, so we know exactly where it sort of sits in those things, and those we attempt to make priority. We don't always achieve that, and especially in this sort of period, because access to staff or access to services that are providing other COVID responses is a limitation. I would say that we don't necessarily say it's a paper exercise at all. We are still carrying out a full audit process in the way that we would do, but we just don't do it face to face. So we utilise teams to hold conversations with individuals to provide that particular thing. We examine evidence in those particular areas. So if we can't take it off the systems or otherwise, or we have to go in otherwise, we will then take a paper copy and we'll scan it through and we'll respond in that particular way. So we are geared up fully to remotely access audits and deliver full audits in those particular ways. Yes, the audits that we have delivered have been mainly the sort of charity type audits, which are fairly straightforward, and they don't really involve an awful lot of interaction with individuals. There are reviews of paperwork and reviews of sort of those particular elements, but it's still you know, it is moving through the planned process as far as we can. Those were must-do audits, so we didn't have really a choice to whether they are priority or not. They are must-do audits because we have to deliver those particular things for the relevant charities, and similar for other functions like the AGS is a must-do function, so we have to deliver that. So those take ultimate priority. Anything we must do, deliver those particular elements. And then we will look at the priority of the audit in terms of its risk ranking and how we're going to deliver that particular thing. We'll contact the service and we'll appropriately line in those particular jobs.
Fantastic, thank you, Ian.
Can I just follow up, Paul, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
I understand the prioritising of the COVID response, and I just wondered if we were going to do any audit looking at anything like our arrangements for awarding the business grants that we've done, any of that area of work that obviously has to be, I know from my experience as an exec member how carefully that was done, and I just wondered if we were going to do any audit of any of the COVID response work that's been done, or if we were going to consider doing that in the future, as this is likely to go on for some time. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. We have already begun to audit the business grant support from the earlier in the year or last year. So I did deliberately remove myself from that particular function on a day-to-day element, so I can do it independently and deliver that without sort of reference. Obviously, Salma and Ilyas were heavily involved in the processing, and that compromises their independence. So it is an audit that's planned, and we are now in consultation with heads of service looking at the plan for the forthcoming year to incorporate any areas that they think needs to be coped with, associated with any of their COVID responses, etc., that will be looked at in the next period. We've not received any specific requests apart from the sort of business grants audit from any heads of service or from any sort of senior management in respect of any other audits. We did provide an ad hoc audit for the food grants, so that was delivered to the hub. So the hub ran the food deliveries, and they had a DEFRA food grant, and we provided an audit for those particular things to ensure that they could recover the funds from DEFRA effectively. So we are responding as we can to those ad hoc requests, and we are meeting those particular elements as far as we can within the limited resources we have.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Any other member?
No questions received, Chair.
Fantastic. Okay, so this just sort of lead us on to point 10.
Chair, sorry.
Go ahead, Louise.
Louise. Just a quick question for Ian. The report notes there's a vacant auditor's position still being recruited to. I just wondered how that's going and if there's any change to the plans for that in view of the latest lockdown. And I'm not sure if staff are working from home, or just curious really as to how that's progressing.
Yes,
want
Chair.
to go over that again, Ian? Yeah.
Yep. We, as I say, we have sort of fully electronic, so we have been interviewing online and testing online. So we've adapted our processes and recruitment to ensure that we can do it in a COVID-safe manner. Obviously, the sort of change that we have in terms of working remotely means that perhaps we have a wider audience for these particular jobs and can sort of accommodate a wider range of individuals. But as I say, we have undertaken that, and we will, most likely, by the time we get to advertise and sort of recruit the next position, we'll still be out interviewing online in those particular sort of circumstances. It is different, definitely different. Obviously, you have technical difficulties, and we have to cope with these particular things. So you don't necessarily see the people that you're trying to interview. They don't necessarily always have the same technology that we would have to sort of test them with, etc. So we have to adapt these processes as we sort of come across them, and try and get the best person that we can for that particular role at the time we sort of advertise.
Thanks.
No worries. Thank you, Ian. Anyone else just before we go? No, we're all good. Okay, so back on to point 10. This is quite closely follows on from what we were speaking about, the fraud risk assessment. And Salma's just going to give us an update on that.
Thank you, Chair. So the fraud risk assessment is carried out on an annual basis. As part of the assessment, recent published fraud reports and articles are examined. As per the CIPFA's fraud and corruption tracker, the main types of fraud affecting the public sector remain the same as previous years, so council tax, business rates, housing benefits and tenancy fraud. So for this assessment, relevant officers were contacted to establish what controls we had in place to reduce the risk of fraud. Officers were also contacted for other types of fraud identified within the reports. The council is a member of the National Anti-Fraud Network. The council also carries out the National Fraud Initiative exercises on an annual basis. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Salma. Any member?
No requests received, Chair.
I just got a question on this. Just following on from what Maggie was basically asking about the internal report and the COVID grants that have been given out. Will any of that sort of be encompassed by this as we move forward? That's sort of taken out of our hands and done externally? Because obviously there's a big perception that a lot of people are applying for grants that are now not entitled to and going after that money. And is that just something that we would deal with internal, or is it likely to get encompassed with the business rates and other types of support?
The business support grants, Chair, as I was quite involved with the process, I wouldn't be able to carry out the audit itself. But as Ian mentioned earlier on, he'd be carrying out the audit, and that would be checking the controls in place, what I presume, and also the processes and areas such as that, to see what kind of controls we had in place. And also as part of the actual audits, some of the things that we've been involved in is any potential reporting of potential frauds that we would carry out, any investigations. So there's two kind of elements in that. One is the reporting of potential fraud, whether that's somebody externally letting us know that there's potential fraud, and the other is carrying out an audit on the business support grants itself and checking what controls we had in place.
That's fine. So both of those are still inside the council.
That is my understanding.
No, that's fine. She goes right. Okay. So no one else before we move on?
Yes, Ian Evening, Chair, I think, just to add
Oh, yeah.
to
Go ahead,
Thomas'
Ian.
comments.
Yes, Chair. The requirements for the grant process has a full external fraud sort of reporting process. So we do make these frauds aware external to the council, so that if it's necessary, they can plot trends, etc., in fraud attempts. And we have experienced at least, I think, 5 within the sort of fraud grants that we've looked at and sort of considered how we could tackle these particular things. So we, as I say, within the sort of groupings, we do expect COVID to present new fraud risks across the council, not necessarily just in business support grants, but clearly this is one that there's a national sort of awareness, and there are national elements that sort of come through, and especially NAFAN has been a particular help in those particular things, because that enables the local authorities that experience frauds to report them to others, and then we can respond to their particular fraud and make sure that we're not exposed to those particular elements.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Okay, so we're on to item 11, strategic risk register. Good, yeah. And that's going to be Ian again, I believe.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I must admit, it's a long time, but at the last meeting, we did discuss the increased risk of local government reorganisation, and this was taken through management team soon after that particular meeting, and we have adjusted the risk register based on that particular element. So we've increased the risk of changes in the political landscape to reflect that increased element of change, if you like. Although it is on a longer term horizon, we don't expect it to be coming in immediately, but it's still there, and it's still potential there for a particular decision to sort of come through. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Any member? I can see some people pressing. No,
No request to speak, Chair. Anyone signalling to speak? Doesn't appear to be, Chair.
I was mistaken. Okay, thank you, Ian. Okay, so item 12. This is over to Catherine. She's going to give us an update on the annual report for the ROPA report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the report provides members with an annual update of authorisations issued under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act of 2000, and this is in accordance with the previous recommendation of the IPCO. Members will be aware that the Council needs to obtain a RIPA authorisation if it wishes to carry out covert surveillance. Local authorities' ability to carry out covert surveillance is limited by legislation and therefore is rarely used. In the financial year 2019 to 2020, there was no surveillance activity which necessitated authorisation under RIPA. Within the report, I also set out that the Council has been the subject of a telephone and desktop-based assessment by the IPCO in March of last year. The report of the IPCO was satisfied with the Council's processes, but has made recommendations to strengthen compliance. These include refreshing the policy and developing further training for staff. Work on the recommendations is underway, and a refreshed policy will be brought to the next meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. I ask you to note the recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Any member?
No request, Chair. No one signalling. Councillor Ellison, Chair. Councillor Ellison.
Just thinking. Go on, Ricky.
It's a question more about policies than anything else. Not particularly on RIPA, so if you'll just allow me some freedom, Paul, it was just to simply ask, do we have a standardised process for any policies of the council for when they are reviewed? Because normally with any policies within the organisation that I've been involved with, there is an author's person and there is a date, and I think that's the normal process in the majority of organisations. So I'm slightly surprised that RIPA came and said, oh, you need to change it. Should we not have been changing it anyway, or is this an additional change to a 12-month review?
Thank you, Maggie. you want to answer that, Catherine, or do you want to come back after?
Yeah, I can answer the specific question rather than a general question. In relation to this particular policy, we did refresh it before we had the inspection because it certainly needed that, and that probably was an annual thing. The inspection has raised other issues, and so we felt it was appropriate to comply with the inspector's recommendations and refresh it further.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? No?
No, Chair. No, Chair.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Catherine. On to item 13, complaint against the councillor. The reports, you've got it in front of you. Any questions, comments? No? Okay.
Sorry, Chair, I just wondered whether Luckman wanted to present the report.
I don't know. We didn't have the last one presented, but I mean, by all means, if you want to speak.
Sorry, okay.
Chair, thank you. It's just, Chair, I think you summarised it. It's just to note the outcome of a complaint against Councillor Marcus Johnston. It's in relation to a complaint made by Councillor Cosima Townley, who alleged that Councillor Johnston made comments on his Facebook page, which she considers was unacceptable and vitriolic and classed as incitement and potentially hate crime as well. That was the allegation. A review or investigation was carried out by the Council's Head of Legal and Democratic Services, which found that Councillor Marcus Johnston, it could have been said that he had failed to treat others with respect and had conducted himself in a manner which was reasonably regarded as bringing the council and himself into disrepute. Following consultation with the council's independent person, a local resolution was agreed between Councillor Marcus Johnston and Councillor Cosima Townley, and an agreed apology was agreed. That's presented in paragraph 10 of the report, and as per the protocol in the Constitution, it's been presented to the committee tonight.
Thank you, Luckman. So after hearing that, any questions? No, well, good stuff. Right, so thank you, Luckman. If we move on to item 14, the work programme, I think that's just as is.
Yes, it is, Chair, just as is, and any items that are on there that haven't come tonight will be coming to the next meeting.
Any problems with the work programme? We're all good? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll see you at the next meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.